Italy, a founding member of the European Union, is taking steps to strengthen its ties with China, potentially challenging the consensus of its closest European allies. What does this mean for the future of the EU? Is Italy charting a separate course, risking European unity? Not long ago, the EU imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, citing unfair subsidies. But China's response wasn't just a simple economic sanction. It was a calculated counterattack aimed at sensitive industries and regions, including Italy's key export markets. China hit Europe where it hurt the most. This wasn't merely a political statement, it exposed cracks within the EU. Italy, feeling the sting of China's precise targeting, began to reconsider its position. Could closer collaboration with Beijing serve Italy's interests better than strict alignment with Brussels? The stakes are high for Italy, particularly in sectors like agriculture. In 2022, Italy exported over $4 billion worth of agricultural products to China, including olive oil and wine. A sudden loss of access to that market would devastate Italian farmers. China's message was clear: partner with us, and your economic interests will be protected. Many Italian farmers, already disillusioned by the EU's hardline stance, have begun to question whether Brussels truly represents their needs. Recent reports indicate that nearly 65% of Italy's agricultural exports depend on stable trade relations with China. For policymakers in Rome, the growing discontent among farmers is impossible to ignore. So, why is Italy willing to challenge EU norms to deepen its ties with China? Italian leaders see an opportunity in China. The EU's collective decision-making often moves slowly, stalling reforms that could benefit Italy's economy. By engaging directly with China, Italy hopes to bypass these delays and secure faster economic growth. Italy's foreign minister recently emphasized the country's focus on forging an independent economic future while maintaining its alliances. This signals a shift. Italy is positioning itself as a leader within the EU, willing to prioritize its own economic needs, even if it disrupts broader EU strategies. China, in turn, offers more than just trade opportunities. Recent agreements are aimed at expanding collaboration in green energy, technology, and manufacturing. These deals could boost Italian exports to China by 15% within 3 years, creating jobs and attracting investments. Italy is betting on a more diversified economy through this partnership. However, Italy's relationship with China isn't new. Historical ties between the two nations go back centuries, starting with Marco Polo's travels and a legacy of mutual exchange. Today, Italy is reviving this connection, positioning itself as a cultural and economic gateway between Europe and Asia. But this pivot is stirring tensions in Brussels. A unified foreign policy is a cornerstone of the EU, and Italy's independent approach highlights a growing divide. Polls show that other EU nations like Greece, Portugal, and Spain are also warming to closer ties with China. Could Italy's example inspire a broader shift within the EU? Italy's trade with China has already surged to $70 billion and continues to grow. The success of this partnership raises questions for Europe. If Italy can achieve significant economic benefits through direct ties with Beijing, what's stopping other nations? Yet this alignment with China risks further fragmentation within the EU. Brussels' pushback against Chinese imports, particularly in technology, could fuel more division. Will Italy's independent path strengthen its economy at the cost of European unity? The recent tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles raise an interesting paradox. Italy, with its strong automotive sector, could be one of the nations most affected by these tariffs. Italian car manufacturers, particularly those in the luxury and electric vehicle segments, rely heavily on Chinese-sourced components and raw material. Industry analysts warn that these tariffs could disrupt production chains, raise costs, and ultimately drive up prices for Italian consumers. For Italy, this is more than a policy challenge. It's an economic dilemma. The central question is whether Italy can afford to align with Brussels on this issue if it jeopardizes its automotive industry. But the stakes go beyond cars. What other Italian sectors could thrive with stronger ties to China, and which might struggle? Italy's economic ties to China extend far beyond automobiles. Key sectors such as fashion, agriculture, and higher education have flourished thanks to partnerships with China. Iconic Italian brands are seeing increasing demand in Chinese markets, while the country's agricultural exports benefit from a growing middle class in China. Italy's higher education institutions are also attracting more Chinese students, fostering collaboration and research. As Italy deepens its relationship with China, the question remains: will this strategy secure Italy's future, or will it fracture the unity of the EU? Italian fashion brands, for example, are rapidly expanding their presence in the Chinese market, according to Bloomberg. Italian luxury exports to China saw a 30% increase in 2023, driven by growing demand from China's rising middle class for premium European goods. However, the benefits of this relationship are not universally felt. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, in Italy, particularly those in local manufacturing, face intense competition from lower-cost Chinese imports. For these businesses, closer economic ties with China may bring more challenges than opportunities. Public opinion is divided on this issue. The debate over closer relations with China extends beyond the business world and resonates with the Italian public. Recent surveys show a nation split on the matter. While 54% of Italians see stronger economic ties with China as a pragmatic move in today's volatile global economy, others worry about becoming overly dependent on a global superpower. Italian leaders are aware of this divide and are treading carefully, as public opinion will play a significant role in shaping both Italy's policies and the broader EU strategy. Italy's relationship with China is pushing the limits of EU diplomacy. Traditionally, the European Union has aimed for a unified approach in its dealings with China. However, Italy is exploring a more independent path, blending economic pragmatism with strategic autonomy. Dr. Federico Moini, a former EU foreign policy chief, described Italy's approach as a tightrope walk, balancing loyalty to EU principles with the pursuit of national interests. If Italy's model proves successful, it could inspire other EU nations to forge similar bilateral relationships with China, potentially shifting EU-China relations away from a one-size-fits-all strategy toward a more flexible, country-specific approach. Italy's engagement with China goes beyond trade. It also focuses on sustainable growth. Recent agreements between Italian and Chinese companies are aimed at developing green technologies, such as solar and wind energy projects expected to power over 1 million Italian homes. These collaborations highlight the forward-thinking aspect of Italy's relationship with China, building a greener and more sustainable future. Italy's growing ties with China have raised concerns among its EU partners and transatlantic allies. Some fear that Italy's independent stance could undermine EU unity. Former European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker once emphasized that the EU's strength lies in its solidarity. Italy's departure from a collective EU policy challenges this idea, raising questions about the future cohesion of the bloc. Furthermore, Italy's shift toward China subtly challenges U.S. influence in Europe. The United States has long urged European allies to maintain a cautious and unified approach toward China. Italy's decision to chart its own course suggests that some European nations may no longer feel compelled to follow Washington's lead, marking a turning point in global power dynamics. Italy's strategy may signal a broader shift in global power dynamics. Traditionally, Europe has aligned with the West under U.S. influence. However, Italy's deepening ties with China could contribute to a more multipolar world, where countries prioritize their own economic and strategic interests. If other EU nations follow Italy's lead, this could fundamentally reshape the balance of power, with China becoming a central partner in Europe. Italy's bold approach is being closely watched. If successful, it could set a precedent for other nations, such as Spain, Portugal, and Greece, to explore similar partnerships with China. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently remarked that Europe must be open to diverse relationships that serve each member's interests. Italy's actions could trigger a domino effect, reshaping EU-China relations and challenging the traditional EU model of collective decision-making. At the same time, this approach carries risks. Prioritizing national interests over EU unity could destabilize traditional alliances, weaken the EU's collective voice on global issues, and strain its relationship with key ally, the United States. Italy's decision to strengthen its ties with China represents a calculated gamble, one that could redefine alliances, reshape the EU's future, and alter global power dynamics. While some see opportunities, others see risks. Regardless, Italy's independent strategy is bold and has global implications. The world is watching to see if this gamble will pay off, inspire others, or lead to unforeseen consequences.